Hello everybody, and welcome to our Fall 21 Product Showcase. These events are really cool. We did the first one, I don't know, a couple years ago, and what's cool about it is you don't have to go to a woodworking show. We're bringing the woodworking show to you by bringing products in from a variety of manufacturers and then taking the time to go through that product, go over that product, and show you the cool stuff about it. And one, it's funner for me, it's more fun for me, and you get a better knowledge base when somebody is helping me with this. So my good friend and also contributing editor for Woodworkers Guild of America, Paul Mayer, is here. And Paul, instead of me trying to give your background and screw it up, you give your background and screw it up, or not, however that goes.
Well, I'll do my best. You tell me if I get anything wrong. Thanks, George. It's always really fun to be here. I love Hammond and love being in your shop. So Paul Mayer, I'm a woodworker based in Minnesota, and I've built a lot of furniture in my home. And the last few years, I've kind of been kind of addicted to bowl turning, so that's been my passion lately.
And in addition to, I don't know, your woodworking side, you're taking a close look at tools. And
Yeah.
part of that is the writing and the video work you do for our Woodworkers Guild. And so that's what's cool about having Paul here is his depth of knowledge in a lot of different categories is really, really good.
Great. Thank you for that, George. Yeah, and I've been writing and doing videos for you for about 12 years now.
Yeah, a long time, right from the start.
From the very beginning. I do some YouTube stuff as well on a Tool Metrics channel of mine, and just always have something going on.
So you probably have tuned in the past to our monthly Q&As that we do. This is a little bit different. So this is not an open Q&A format. We have got 5 real specific products that we're going to go over, and we're going to keep the questions to not general woodworking questions, but questions that are germane to those particular products that we're going to talk about. If, as we're talking about, if we're on product number 1, and then later you think of a question about, we're on product number 3 and you think of a question from product number 1, that's fine. Go ahead and post that question. And at the end, we're going to catch up on any questions that we may have missed or overlooked along the way. Ready to look at product number 1?
That's a good setup. I'm ready when you are.
You and I have talked about the Centipede previously, and we were both pretty big fans of this, and I think we're fannier now, maybe.
Absolutely.
So if you're not familiar with this already, here's the gee whiz factor is little footprint becomes a big work area. This one is 2 foot by 4 foot. There are also models that are larger. If you grab that MDF, so in addition to just this as a work platform, we can open this up and drop that on there and then have a work bench, a work surface here. So where we're going with this one is a bunch of accessories that can be added to this to make it even more versatile than it already is. So I worked with this previously. We shot a video on this, and let's have a look at that video, and then we'll come back and talk about the Centipede some more. I've talked to you about the Centipede before, and what it is a product that goes from a really small footprint when it's stored to a really robust work surface when it's open. And what I want to talk to you about today are some accessories that are now available to go with this Centipede, make it even more versatile than it already is. Let's start with the non-slips. They've got a 3/4 inch tenon on them. They're going to drop right into the holes in the bench. And just like the name says, when those are there and I'm working on a piece, it's not going to slip. So you could be running a belt sander across this, running a router on it, and those non-slips are going to hold it in place. And when you are running a belt sander or router or any other power tool at your Centipede, we can use these hooks, which give you a great spot to drape your extension cords or air compressor hoses. Out of the box, the Centipede is 30 inches tall, If you want to raise your work to new heights, what you can do is pop this off, replace it with this 6-inch riser, and put this back on. And now guess what? We're 6 inches taller. So you get your work higher up and it'll still accept our bench top and the other components that work with the Centipede. One of the things you might find handy to do on your Centipede is cut sheet stock down to size. That's where these come into play. Because of the way they cantilever out, watch how this works. Now, lay my big heavy piece of melamine on there and set it up so that the saw is going to come right through there. And what those will do is prevent that sheet from collapsing in as you're making that cut. Another cool addition. Centipede is neat. These new accessories make it even neater. And you gotta love that when you're done and you do that, it's got that tiny little footprint, very easy to put away. Having a quick look here to see if we have any questions yet. No preguntas in front of us at this point. So you're going to do a little show and tell. I think this is maybe one of your favorite Centipede features.
It is, and I think, I mean, there's a lot to love about this product. You know, I'm in a smaller shop. When I need workbench space, it would be great to be able to just prop it up real quick like that, put it away when I don't need it.
Because when you need it, you need it.
And when I don't, it's in the way.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, you know, I love that concept, but I love these non-stick bench dog.
Or non-skid.
Or non-skid. Yeah.
They are sticky.
We want sticky with this. But the ability to pop these in and have a quick, you know, gorilla grip on a panel like this. So now if you wanted to use that for, you know, belt sanding. I've had, you know, in my early woodworking days, I remember running a belt sander, having the piece on the workbench without something like that, and it shot across the shop and exploded it when it hit the cement wall. So this is going to really hold that solidly in place. If I want to do edge routing around there, any kind of operation where I need that stability on the piece and without having to clamp it and then move the clamp when I bring the...
Because the edges are left open, so that's, it's nice.
Exactly.
Belt sander, or like you talked about using a router, so then you can get all the way around all four edges without buzzing into anything. So Centipede, product number 1 for us here, and I love big product, small footprint. Yep. So Paul and I are both big bandsaw users, and part of that has to do with the turning that we do, but two, I've just found a bandsaw to be one of the most versatile tools you can have in the shop. Cutting straight lines, cutting curves. So here we're looking at the Grizzly 10-inch benchtop bandsaw, and there's a lot of neat stuff going on here, a lot of features that are built into it. Quick release on the blade tension is a great thing that a lot of big bandsaws have. It makes blade changes a whole lot easier, and it's on this unit as well. And again, what we've done here is had a look at the bandsaw offline, not live. And let's have a look at that video and some of the features that the bandsaw offers. Having a look here at Grizzly's 9-inch bandsaw. Got it unplugged so we can have a look under the hood. One of the things that's cool on a bandsaw is quick release on that upper wheel, so that when you change blades, it makes that a whole lot simpler to do. Got a dust port on the back that'll readily accept a shop vac hose. Blower here is automatically going to blow air at your line of cut whenever you're running the saw. help keep that nice and clear so it's easy to see your work. And the light here, of course, is to illuminate that area for the same reason. Let's do a little curvy work here so you can see how the saw goes. Now, with that curve work, I don't know if this happens to you, but it happens to me all the time. About the time I get a 3/4 inch bandsaw blade on my bandsaw, I have something where I want to do a cut with a 1/4 inch blade on my bandsaw. So another way to look at adding tools to your shop is from a perspective of my bandsaw is tied up with that big blade, but I need a small blade. This can be the saw for that. This can be the tool for that, and allow me to just keep that smaller blade on this machine so I always have something accessible to do those curvy cuts. Now, we're not limited to curvy cuts here. We can do a nice straight line, and what's going to facilitate that is that laser. Think about the laser as a forecaster of where you need to be in order to follow that line. For this, I'm going to leave the work light off because it's going to be easier for the camera to see that laser. And watch how this is going to help you out cutting straight lines. As I'm cutting, keep an eye on right there where the laser is leading that cut. That's what's showing me exactly where I need to keep the board position so I can follow that line. It's one way to get a straight line. The saw does come with a fence and a miter gauge. So let me change blades, get the fence on here, and do a resaw on this saw and have a look at that method of cutting a straight line. One of the things I love about bandsaws is using the fence here like a rip fence on a table saw to make cuts like that. And what's great about that is the kerf of a bandsaw blade is so narrow that you're sending very little waste up into the vacuum when you're doing that. We can also cut this way, resawing. And this is going to be neat. Let's see what that lovely piece of Spanish cedar looks like on the inside. Resawing is cool because we get book matches. Man, what a beautiful little piece. So there's a little overview of the Grizzly 9-inch bandsaw, and one of the things that's also a cool feature about this saw is when I'm done with this here, I can disconnect my power, disconnect my vac, and have portability that I can put that saw away. What do you think, Paul?
That's a feature-rich tool. You know, when I see a product with that kind of capability, I think immediately second bandsaw, right? All those capabilities. I've got my big bandsaw set up with a big blade for resawing and roughing out bowl blanks. Wouldn't it be nice to have something like that you could use for your curved cuts and smaller pieces?
Without having to do a blade swap all the time. Yeah,
precisely.
And the other thing, at the end of that video, I picked it up and moved it just a little bit. The fact that you can, I mean, it's like a suitcase. You've got a handle on here, small footprint, smaller tool. The fact that you can pick it up easily off your bench and put it away. And then two, before this started, we were talking about it's cool that we have the blower on here to keep your work area clear. I already mentioned the quick release. We've got an onboard light, and then the laser as a neat thing, because from teaching woodworking classes, one of the things, bandsaw is probably one of the tools I see people struggle with the most, because you're working freehand all the time and you're trying to follow a line. So having that prediction of cut that the laser introduces is a very handy thing. Dust collection is good on this, so a lot of great features on this one.
Yep. I love the dust port. It's in the right spot.
That's true.
It's perfect.
That's true. Yeah, like Paul said, feature-rich tool here. So this, Paul, was an interesting science experiment, and I know you and I talked about this a lot. If you're going to do woodworking projects, you're going to do finish. And where it was interesting is we talked about aqua coat, in that where I was all gaga over the results of the science fair test that we're going to talk more about in a second. You were more gaga just over the look and feel of this as a water-based finish compared to solvent-based finishes that you've used in the past.
Absolutely. It has the warmth of a solvent-based finish. I would never guess that it had that it was a water-based product.
So the science fair part of this, here's what I'm talking about. There is a test that is administered by the KCMA, Kitchen Cabinet Manufacturers Association, and that's why this sheet is here. This was my roadmap for the test. In this test, you put like the worst possible stuff you could put on a finish. Grain alcohol, orange juice, coffee. It's all described in the video that we're about to show you. And you leave it on there for a day. And honestly, I'm aghast that this seems pretty extreme to me. Think about the worst case scenario of somebody spilling stuff on your beautiful kitchen or dining room table, and we've covered that here. So instead of me rambling on and on, let's look at the video that covers the science fair test, and you can see the results there, and then we'll come back and talk about it some more.
Sounds good.
We're going to do a little bit of a science experiment here. One of the things that concerns people with using water-based products, apparently, is the idea that water-based products are they, as durable as solvent-based products. So I've got 3 different AquaCoat products here. I've got boards prepped with those products on them, and we're going to use KCMA standards for this, Kitchen Cabinet Manufacturers Association. And I'll talk more about those standards and what I'm going to do, but it's pretty cool. It's a little bit like a science fair. Going to put some highly acidic stuff on these finishes, see how they do. Here's the deal. Think about whatever, kids are sitting at your table or you have company over and people spill stuff. What's the stuff in your head that sets up the worst case scenario for that? Here's what we're about to put on these finishes. Lemon juice, grain alcohol, vinegar, orange juice, mustard, ketchup, my favorite ingredient, coffee, and what do these all have in common? Well, they're liquids, so a lot of finishes just don't hold up to liquids in general. 2, this is all really highly acidic stuff. The way this test works is that these items go onto the boards, they sit for 24 hours, mustard sits for only 1 hour. Then when they come off, we have a look at the results. So next step is put the stuff on. I've got a little bit of a chemistry background, and so I did set this up with, in order to get repeatable results. One of the things I did for that is I made a road map, and this shows me top of the board. All the boards are marked with a T, and then grain alcohol, vinegar, orange juice. So there's a grid here so that when I put those ingredients on the boards, they're all getting done exactly the same way. Remember that according to the KCMA standards, most of that stuff sits overnight, sits 24 hours. The mustard sits for 1 hour, and then that comes off. So the other thing I've done is I'm using just a basting needle, and I've got the stuff, the ingredients inside those needles. That's going to let me control getting it onto the boards uniformly. And next thing, we're ready to put schmutz on boards. Then, I know I've said this before, the mustard is going to come off in 1 hour. Everything else is going to sit for 24 hours. So now we're just waiting to see results. "24 hours later," I've mentioned a couple times, the mustard comes off right away. Now I'm getting the rest of the stuff off. And I am so impressed. This is very cool. You know, again, talk about picking like the worst possible stuff to spill on a finished piece of furniture. This is it. And boy, is it coming off clean. Let me get the residue off of here, and then we'll have a look at the boards more closely. I've shifted things around just a little bit because one of the easiest ways to see what a finish looks like is to get a low glancing look across it. So when we look at these finishes, when we look at these boards, it's just incredible that even with lemon juice, mustard, ketchup, all the stuff we've talked about, no marks left on the finish. So again, what we're looking at here is Aqua Coat lacquer, tabletop, and their aquathane finishes, and man, they certainly did pass the test. That, Paul, was like, it was one of the funner, cool, you know, I do have this chemistry, physics background from my youth when I thought I was going to teach high school chemistry and physics, and that was such a nice throwback to that, and it was fun, and it was amazing to see the results. So again, I mentioned it in that video, but we looked at their lacquer, their aquathane, and their tabletop, 3 distinctly different products, all on red oak plywood, the pieces that I have in front of me right now, and all of which passed those extreme tests with flying colors. And we were talking about brush versus spray. Either one is, either application method is fine. And then the other thing I did want to point out too is I've got gallon jars in here, but these are also available in smaller containers. So if you don't need this volume of liquid for your projects, you can get less of it.
It's good stuff. You know, if this was 20 years ago, I'd have brought my kids over here. They used to do that test on our dining table every night.
Whether you wanted them to or
not.
not.
Yeah, absolutely, without my prompting.
Yeah. So it was neat. It was very eye-opening for me to see the Aqua Coat finish hold up under those, what I think are pretty extreme conditions. Woodmaster, and we've seen this product on the showcase before. You also happen to own a Woodmaster. So give us, for you, I know you really like the tool. Look at you grinning. I know you like the one that you have. So how does this fit into your scheme of woodworking?
Yeah, so I've been, using this product for about 10, 11 years now. And it is just front and center in my shop. I use it, I say it spends probably 95% of its time as a planer, and I can run anything through that. I mean, I run some wide, rough planks through that thing, and it just powers through. I mean, this is a 5 horsepower motor, which is a very robust motor for a planer, and just has no problem taking a nice deep cut. I have the helical head, which I believe you have as well, and that just lays down a very nice surface on it. So that's kind of how it spends most of its time. I switch it over occasionally to drum sander mode, but really only when I'm doing end grain, because the helical head does such a nice job on a variety of different hardwoods. But if I'm doing end grain like a cutting board, I'll switch it over.
Because it's an important point. You shouldn't be planing end grain cutting boards. It's another whole topic. But great application for the drum sander function.
Yep, absolutely. And like you showed in the video, it doesn't take much to switch it over from one mode to the other. So what I'll try to do is, gang up 2 or 3, have 2 or 3 cutting boards ready to go, switch it over, run them through, and then switch it back to planing mode. Those are kind of the practical kind of workhorse applications. Probably the thing that I get the most giddy about with this tool is making custom molding. So I build a lot of furniture, and I love being able to take a piece from the same flitch that I'm building the furniture from and make a piece of custom molding to grain and color match with the rest of the wood on the piece of furniture. And I've included that in probably half dozen different pieces of furniture, and it just never gets old. When it gets to that point in the project, I just get really excited. I've also done custom crown molding for, I think, 3 different houses where they had some existing molding and then they did an addition or just remodeled, and they wanted to match the molding. So I was able to send in a small piece of the molding to Woodmaster, have them custom match the profile, send me the knives, and run it through in the same species of wood, and it's a perfect match.
So it's with the trim, I like a couple things out of this. One, the fact that you can get that grain and color match because you're cutting from the same, even if it's not the same flitch, if I get in, 100 board feet, and I use that for the project and for the molding, I should have good similarities there. And then 2, there are moldings that you just can't buy in certain species of wood. And so being able to produce that on your own is going to be the way to go. So a question, so what we've got going here is a machine that planer, we can rip, we can make molding, drum sander. So a question I've heard a bunch of times is, what does it take to get from one function to another, which is a great question. So the video that we did ahead of time on this product was taking us through the process of changing from one function to another to help you understand that. So let's have a look at that video and give you that overview of the changeover. Let's have a look at changeovers on the Woodmaster, and specifically what I'm going to do in this case is go from the planer, or the way it's currently set up, to the sanding head. Planer heads out, obviously. And I gotta say the instructions in the owner's manual for this are really, 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 really good to walk you through this. And maybe it's not something you do every day, so having a really good owner's manual to refer to for the changeovers is huge. So now it's kind of second verse, same as the first. The difference is that with the planer head, the individual shafts come in from each side. With the sanding drum, one accessory shaft is going to carry the whole drum. So now we can have a look at getting the sanding drum in here. Once the accessory shaft is in, then lock collars go back on the outside. And inside here, there's a set screw, an Allen screw, that's going to hold the sanding drum to the shaft. There we go, our sanding drum is in place, shroud over the top. Now, let's look next at when we want to go from one of these operations, planing or sanding, to using the molding head. Going to undo a bunch of what I just did. Next, we can get the molding head in there, and this is going to be very repetitive to what you've already seen with the sanding drum. Same accessory shaft, but in this case, we engage the molding head. And from here, really, you've seen a bunch of this already. We're going to get keys here on the accessory shaft that allow me to lock the molding head in place, get the collars and the pulley reinstalled out here on the outboard end, put the belt back on, shroud over the top, and the molding head is on. So transitions, planer to sanding drum to molding head, great instructions and straightforward stuff once you've stepped through it a couple times. So we looked at a bunch of changeover on the machine. One of the things that I did not do on that pre-roll video was the saw blades. And the reason I didn't is it's just so similar. Can you grab one of those guys? The accessory shaft still gets used, and then we slip that in there. So this is going to slip into the machine the same way you saw it happen for the molding head. And you can space these however you want, so you can set up multiple heads in order to rip stuff to, a great example we were talking about earlier would be face frame stock. if you have miles of face frame to make, you could have 2 blades on this thing. So every 1 board you send through, you're getting multiple pieces cut to just the right width.
You know, when you use these, one thing I really noticed is because it's such a small diameter blade, and it's a good piece of carbide on there, really sharp, but you don't get run out like you do on a bigger saw blade. So the cut quality you get is fantastic with these.
Yeah. Now we do have a question from Cleston, which will be for you.
Okay.
What's the cost of a custom blade for the Woodmaster? So I think this is thrown back to when you said you had to have those molding knives made up.
Yeah, it will depend on a couple things. One is, do you want carbide or high-speed steel? I've only used high-speed steel. Unless you're running production, I don't think that it's probably worth the additional expense for carbide. High-speed steel is very durable, and I've had no issues with it staying plenty sharp. So depending on how you want to run it, if you run it on the shaft, you can run a double blade. I've only run a single blade, but then the cost is per inch, so just straight per lineal inch of the knife. And I don't remember what the cost is, but they're really economical. I was surprised by how inexpensive they were. Turnaround was really quick, and they just did a great job. I mean, the finish on these things is superb. They're just polished.
It's amazing to me that you can send in, I think that's a crazy cool thing, that you can send in a piece of existing molding and say, match this profile. So I think for somebody who's in a world of remodeling, that's
absolutely
huge, because we don't, like as commonplace moldings, we don't see the big crown or base moldings today that were going into houses, pick a number, 50, 100 years ago or more. So to be able to get those custom run is cool.
Absolutely. A lot of people make a living with these. They'll buy one of these, put it in their garage, and sell custom molding for just that application. Some contractor that's doing work in an older home and needs to custom match that piece. It's just a great application for a tool like that.
So changeover, simple. You saw it on the video, and a lot of versatility in this machine. Small footprint, a lot of big stuff going on here. Well, let's dovetail this tool into what we're talking about. I waited a really long time to tell a bad pun. So, Leigh dovetail jig. This is their 18-inch jig, and I've used Leigh jigs for a long time. And one of the things that I really like about it is the wide array of things that they bring to the table, the wide array of things that they offer. Through dovetails, half-blind dovetails, the ability to variable space the dovetails, and there's a lot of stuff going on here. The owner's manual for these jigs is incredible and very, very easy to follow, very, very easy to work with. The other thing that's really cool, running a dovetail jig, you tend to end up getting a lot of stuff right in the breadbasket, a lot of dust. It's throwing a lot of stuff forward. So there is a dust collection attachment on this that does 2 things. Really good job picking up the dust coming off, and it stabilizes the router. And again, from teaching a lot of woodworking classes, one of the mistakes I've seen people make is as they come back on the dovetail jig with their router, it can have a tendency to tip off if they're not paying close attention. So this dust collection bar out here also stabilizes the router so that can't tip and then mess up your workpiece. For this one, on the video we did ahead of time, we've got some joinery that's done there, and you'll have the opportunity to see the effectiveness of that dust shroud. So let's take a peek at that video we've got. Something I've seen happen many, many, many times with furniture is people look at it and they open the drawers and they look at the drawers, and what they're doing is they're looking to see if there are dovetails in the drawers. Dovetails in woodworking have really become a mark of good craftsmanship in the piece that people are looking at or the piece that people are building. I'm telling that story because today I want to walk you through the Leigh Super 18. Now, a couple things. This is 18. That means it's the 18-inch model. That's its capacity. It could be down to a 12, up to a 24, so you can match the jig to what size of work you're going to typically be doing. We're going to do a bunch of different things on here. We're going to start with half-blind dovetails. The layout that we're going to do is going to be evenly spaced, just like this. One of the things that's really cool about the Leigh jig is you can also move the fingers around and do variable spacing. So we could also do variable space half-blind dovetails, and we can also do variable space through dovetails, where of course we can see the joint from both sides. So this isn't designed to be a real specific how-to step-by-step, but I want to give you an overview, a feel for how the jig works so that you have a better understanding of it. So again, one thing we've got going for us here is that the fingers can be loosened and then moved so that, as opposed to jigs where the comb is in a fixed position, we can move these fingers to have whatever layout we want. The other thing I really like about the jig is that it's set up very well where it gives us information right on the comb that helps us know what mode we're in, what dimension we should be set at. So that layout is really, really nice. And the other cool thing is there's a cheat sheet that actually just stores under the jig, and there's all sorts of information there that helps you with the setup. So if it's a little bit of time between uses, you can refer to this in order to know where to go and what to do. And I'll also say, Leigh has always had amazing owner's manuals where everything is very well laid out. The images are great. The step-by-step is great. So lots of good stuff here, lots of support to help make it easier for you to use the jig. Here's where we're at right now. Half-blind dovetails. We're set up to make this happen. Like many, many dovetail jigs, the Leigh jig relies on a guide bushing. That guide bushing projects from the base of the router, and that's what's going to follow the template, follow the fingers as we trace them so that the bit itself can't cut into our jig. Of course, when I'm doing this kind of thing, I've got the router unplugged. Another cool thing about the jig is this accessory. This is going to do two things for us. Sitting here, it's going to help support the router so that it can't tip in this direction. If the router tips down, it can mess up your joint. The other thing that's cool about it is that I will put a vacuum hose on it, and what that's going to do is grab the stuff that would normally be blowing off of here all over the front of my shirt. So let me get this in the right spot. And then this tracks with the router, and that's what my shop vacuum hose is going to connect to. So where I'm at with this is 1/2 inch, 14-degree router bit. The depth on that is already set. And what I'll be able to do is in one fell swoop, cut both the tails and the pins and sockets. So the tail board is in the jig vertically. The pin and socket board is in the jig horizontally. We're going to get everything cut in one pass, looking like this. One thing that's definitely noteworthy is I don't have chips all over the front of my shirt because the dust collection on this works so well. Now let me pop that off, the dust collection accessory. And there you can really see now our half blind. There are the tails, pins and sockets are there, and again, all cut in one pass. And proof being in the pudding, let's do this. Now, let's have a look at when we go from half blind to through dovetails, everything is done with the same set of fingers, with the same comb. And what's neat about the way Leigh has labeled these things is we can configure this, and then all we got to do is kind of look at the roadmap right there, TD pins, through dovetail pins. That'll tell us when we're ready to be in the pin configuration versus the tail configuration. So next thing we're going to do is look at through dovetails on this Super 18. As I move toward doing through dovetails, let's look at a couple things here. I've talked about the ability to move the fingers around, make variable spaced joints, variable spaced dovetails. So the way that works is simply by loosening the finger, and then we can slide that. In this case, I've got my material in here, and this is the starting point for a through dovetail. I'd get a board in here, I would start putting my fingers on, and then, or fingers in place, and then as you move these, a great way to do this is use a uniform spacer block like bar stock in order to create the spacing that you want. So I would use this as I come in from the right, use this as I come in from the left, so that I'm creating uniform spacing on those. And by uniform spacing, I mean you can look by, or you can see by looking at these, I used 3/8 bar stock out here, 1/8 inch bar stock here, so it's uniform but variable, which is cool. Then when I look at my roadmap, this is through dovetail pins. That's not where I want to be. We want to be on tails first. So that's simple. We take this off, look for tails right there. Set and set, and that all that information is in the owner's manual about where do I set. And for this cut, I've got a dovetail bit in the router. And again, with our guide bushing. The guide bushing is what's going to follow those fingers so that the bit doesn't have the opportunity to cut into the comb. There are tails. Now I'm going to end up moving the comb for our next cut. So let me go ahead and pull that off there so you can see better. There are tails. Next step, we're going to flip this into the pin position. I have to change router bits too, and then we'll make our pins and sockets. Pretty cool. Here's where we're at. I switched to the through dovetail pin mode, which is pins and sockets, and then the position of the fingers, forward and back, is what controls the size of the sockets, the fit of the joint. All of that's very well explained in the owner's manual. Where that leaves us now is pins and sockets are cut. There we go, through dovetail. And this is what we want, a little bit of overhang there, trim that off after the glue is dry. So just a little overview here of how the Leigh jigs work, how they make dovetails. And I'm so impressed with the vacuum collection on this and the dust collection and the fact, the stability that that adds to the router when I'm in that forward position out here before I'm initiating the cut, so that I don't give the opportunity to the router for it to tip a little bit. So that's a look at how they work and what they do. So cool stuff there. And what didn't get covered on that video is with this jig, you can also do finger joints and sliding dovetails as well. And again, laid out very, very, very well in the owner's manual. I love the ability to vary the spacing. I think
Yeah.
I am not a hand tool, dovetail cutting kind of a guy. So I love to be able to emulate the look of those hand cut dovetails by creating variable spacing on the jig.
Yeah, I agree. And I am more of a hand-cut dovetail person, and I've always done that because I felt that I could get more creativity and variability in it. And when I look at this, I think they've solved all of that. There's nothing that I have ever done in hand-cut dovetailing that I couldn't do with this tool.
But faster.
But faster, and I've never ever gotten a fit. I don't know what I would do with my gallons of wood filler that I go through when I cut them by hand. So no, absolutely faster and way more precise.
The Leigh jig is a really nice setup, good capacity, a really, really great way to cut dovetails, plus a big variety of other joints. Now, we've had some questions come in. So we're actually going to recircuit our circuit here, and tool by tool, we're going to get your questions answered. All right, Captain. Okay, so Ross asks, can you get a 4x4 Centipede but only expand 2x4 of it? So I've got a 4x4. I've got two 4x4s in the shop, and I don't think, I'm not sure that would work. I mean, if we kind of emulate that here, and not that it necessarily wouldn't work, but I don't think it would be your best approach. So if you took off the MDF, if you take off the MDF, so similarly, if we do this to get a smaller footprint, when I do down pressure, it wants to go out to the extent of the system. So you'd have to have some way to constrain it in that smaller setup so that it didn't do that. So it's kind of a qualified yes, but it's maybe not your best use. Doug says, do the dog holes accept Rockler cookies? They're 3/4 inch dog holes. So I don't know off the top of my head if it's 3/4 inch. You got to be a little careful. 3/4 inch versus 19 millimeter, because companies go back and forth. So you'd have to check that. But these are 3/4 inch dog holes. Richard asks, could the Centipede be used conveniently as an extension support for a small table saw? Well, with the MDF top, it's a nice, robust table. You got to get the height to match.
That would be the thing.
Would be the challenge. I mean, it'd make a great outfeed table. And one of the things in the video that we shot ahead of time that you saw is these columns can go in there and extend the height, raise it up by 6 inches. So this is 30. My table saw is 34.
Usually
I
that's
think.
kind of the 34-ish range is kind of the.
So this could be, this could be a very good base for an outfeed table, and then you'd have to figure out something to get the top of this even with the top of your saw.
Could just build a separate platform for when you're using it like that. Take it off and then have a lower surface, and then you could leave it in place and it wouldn't interfere with anything on the table saw.
Yeah, it wouldn't take much. Okay, now I got to do some scrolling because I want to try to get these all answered while we're here. Dan asks, how accurate are the dog holes in the Centipede worktop? Can you use them with dogs for rail alignment and the track saw? So I have not done, so I think what we're talking about here is like on an MFT table type, right? Where you can put rails in there and then conclusively that in this direction and in this direction, the banks of holes are perfectly perpendicular to each other, perfectly parallel to each other. I don't know, because that's not the manner in which I used it. That would be a good question for Bora. All right, that wraps up our questions on the Centipede. So some questions we've had come in on the Grizzly bandsaw. Doing a little scrolling to get to them. What's the smallest blade, Seth asks, that the Grizzly bandsaw will allow? Can it go to a smaller blade than floor standing units? It's a 1/4 inch blade in there now, and Paul actually did peek at the saw earlier. We think it would go to an 1/8 inch blade.
I think so. And
But-
it uses bearing guides, and you'd have to check on that. But if not, you could probably put different guides on it, and it certainly would. It would certainly accept that. It's a matter of if the bearings are going to dull the blade.
Because they won't, because of their position on the saw.
Exactly.
So it's we're a kind of unqualified I don't know, unfortunately, but it's a question that Grizzly could definitely answer for you with the specs for the saw. And then
and I think the other part of that question was the larger saws can also take 1/8 inch if they have the right guides for it.
yeah, it's the same problem.
Exactly.
On a floor model.
Exactly.
Is preventing the guides from
Yep.
dulling or taking the set off the
Yep,
teeth.
exactly.
And then the other one was about resaw capacity, which I know is in here and I'm currently missing it. 3.5 inches from table to bottom of the guide, right there. And that wraps us up on the bandsaw. Now on my chemistry experiment with finishes, a couple of questions about aquacoat here. One was how many coats of finish went on in order to do the test, and that's 2 coats. There are 2 coats of each of these on the oak veneered plywood. And scrolling.
Which makes it a very impressive test because you would normally put a larger quantity of coats on for a table, for a kitchen table. I'd probably put 5 coats.
Yeah, and it'd be good to read the directions with the product and talk to Aquacoat about their manufacturer's recommendations for your number of coats. But in this particular case, it was 2. And that takes care of us on our Aquacoat questions. All right, a few questions for the Woodmaster, by which I mean you.
They knew that.
One was from Carl, how do you keep your material lined up when you're running a molding head? How do you keep your material feeding straight, which is a great question.
Yeah, so you want to have some guides that just clamp down. This white surface here has slots in it to clamp your guides down, and then you just get them so that your blank lines up right between the guides, and it aligns perfectly and keeps it feeding through straight.
It's a pair of fences is what makes it work.
Exactly.
You're creating a runway, and the material has no choice but to feed straight through that tunnel, that runway. And that wraps us up on the Woodmaster. All right, on the Leigh jig, a question of, will it work on a router table equally well? Are there major differences? So, thinking through, I have not done the inverted dovetail jig concept on a router table. With this one, I'm going to say, because of these, it's not set up for this, I don't think. Part of what I'm looking at is just the way the top of the jig looks. So could we flip this whole thing over and run it on a router table? I don't think it's configured to do that. So it's a good question for Leigh, but I'm going to tentatively say I don't think so. But double check with them. All right. Well, Paul, that wraps us up on our Fall 21 Product Showcase. And I really appreciate you coming and lending your extensive input to everything that we've got going on here. I think you're as much of a tool geek as I am, so I think
I do nerd out.
I think you also find this pretty fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's, for you, one of the things I really enjoy about what I do for a living is having the opportunity to go to woodworking shows, find tools, and then bring them to you so that you get the opportunity to see stuff that I get the opportunity to see. And again, it's cool for us that instead of you having to go to a woodworking show, we're bringing the show right into your homes. We're bringing the show right to you. Any cool, smart aleck closing comments from you? I should be careful what I ask.
Yeah, okay. No, I think that, you certainly did a good job of keeping the puns to a minimum tonight, so that was great. Time always flies.
Night's early.
Time always flies for me at these events. This is a lot of fun for me, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here again.
Well, thanks so much for watching, and watch your calendar, watch your email inbox, and you'll get notified when we're going to do this again.